Lester, I'm happy to be back here again with you to talk about some of your life growing up as a kid and where, and then perhaps later getting into your time in World War II. In the meantime, I've invited your daughter Lori to start to talk to you about where you grew up as a kid, where were you born, and so forth. So lay it on me. Where were you born? And then Lori will pick it up.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm Lester Erland Johnson. I was born in Walker in 1922. But before I get into that, I would like to say something about my parents. My dad was born in Sweden in 1890, and he went to school through the 8th grade. After that, he studied blacksmithing, and he came to this country in about 1922. He homesteaded an area of about 80 acres in Minnesota, 2 miles east of Tamarack. His brother came here too, and he got a 40 acres homesteaded adjacent to that. Now, he at that time, work was very scarce, and he worked in different jobs. One of them was a John Deere plow shop in Moline, Illinois. He worked in Iowa digging trenches for tile, and he worked in the harvest fields and different places where he could get a job. And then in 1918, he served in the U.S. Army in France. Before 1918, he built a house on that property. When he came home from the military, a fire had gone through that area and burned his house down. All he had left was a pump standing out there. And then he built another house, of course, and he married my mother, Gertrude Giving, in June 1st of 1920. And of course then they lived there. He got his I can't, I lost my mind.
It'll come to you in a while.
But anyway, he got to be a citizen of this country in 1920. My mother was born in 1898. Her parents were both immigrants from Norway. She was born near a town called Syri that's up near Twin Valley. And then she moved out, that family moved out to north of Tamarack. Now, in 1922, when I was born, my mother, first I want to explain that there was no road to our home. The top of the ditch bank had been leveled off somewhat and it was enough so they could get horse and sleigh and horse and wagons and so forth, because they didn't have any car at that time. In 19, when I was about 2 years old, the house burned, caused by a chimney fire. Dad rebuilt that house on that foundation. That house today is still standing, and it's being used. When I was young, of course, all the information that I've gotten has been hearsay. I started to, I can go back to about my 5th year or so, and I can remember instances at that time. I would tag along with my dad. We'd go out to the swamp and out to the wooded area, and he would cut wood for the next year's supply of wood for their furnace. I enjoyed when he would go along and take a gun along, and then he would shoot rabbits. These rabbits would hang up in the chicken coop, and the chickens would pick at them. I also enjoyed when he would go out and cut ice, because there was no refrigerator in that time. We had an ice house that was perhaps 10 feet square or so, something like that. And on the bottom, there was no floor in it. It would cover the bottom with sawdust, maybe about 4 inches thick or something like that. Now, he had a special saw that he would cut these blocks of ice in, probably about 18 inches square and whatever depth the ice was at that time. And I would go with him out there, and of course he made sure that I didn't get too close to that hole in the lake. And he'd haul those blocks of ice home and pile them up in that shed. He'd keep about 8 inches of space between the walls and the blocks. Then, after that, he would fill that space all the way around with sawdust. He got the sawdust from the sawmill in Tamarack. I'm going to say a little bit about that sawmill. My dad worked at that sawmill for many years, and because of his blacksmithing trade, he would make these huge sleds that they would haul their timber on. And the guy he worked for was Marcus Nilsson. He was an entrepreneur guy, type of guy, and he got into all kinds of things, and sometimes didn't have enough money to pay my dad. And one time, my dad's pay was, he got some old beat up furniture, so he got something. Okay, during these years from 5 years old to 7, 8, I did not have many toys. I have now yet a little cast iron car that I played with so much, that the axles in that car, cast iron car, wore way up in. When I was 7 years old, I started school in Tamarack. I couldn't go the year before because it was so difficult for me to get to school. There was no road that went by our place, only that top of that ditch bank. Our road went a mile west and made a turn and went across the about a half a mile and across the railroad tracks at what they called Bridge 60. And then that road went west and it interconnected with the highway that went to Duluth. That highway's number was number 2. That highway went through Tamarack and north for just about 2 miles, and then went east through Wright and Cromwell and so forth. During this time, my mother was taking some kind of treatments and in Duluth. Well, I'll back up a notch. In 1924, my dad bought the first car. It was a 1924 brand new Ford Model T. 4-door with the side curtains that in the wintertime you couldn't see through them because they got all frosted over. And we would go to Duluth with that Model T. And of course it was, at that time, that road was probably 60 miles to Duluth. It went around all the swamps and so forth, and so it wasn't straight. Now, when I got down to Duluth, of course, you know, my eyes were big as saucers and that, because all these buildings and all this noise and these street cars that were carrying people around, they were electric. They had they followed electric wire that was up above, and that, and when the streetcar had to go in a different place, a guy would go out with a pole and he would move that over to another wire, and away we'd go. And they were very noisy. So I appreciated the solitude and the quiet life out there on the farm. One time when we were coming back, and we were north of Tamarack a ways, we came upon a car that flipped over and it was wheels up in a water-filled ditch. Well, we were scared that there could be somebody in it, but my dad made an inspection and found that it was okay. Now I am going to school in Tamarack in our first grade. My dad takes me there in a wagon pulled by horses. It's almost 3 miles to get there. In the wintertime, he would take me with the horse and sleigh. And sometimes I'd have to walk that myself. I didn't mind that too much. But I'm going to back up another notch because I kind of forget some things. One of these times that we had been to Duluth and we came back and it was late at night. It was dark. And this road wasn't much of a road, you know. Even with the lot of clearance that the Model T had, we got stuck. Before this time, I was gung-ho on getting stuck. Now we are stuck about a mile from home. And we get out of the car and we start walking home. We didn't get 100 feet. And there's we call it an island. It's a high ground out in the swamp. there were wolves out there howling. And the chills went up and down my spine. I decided that I never wanted to get stuck again. Now, we had to walk home. My dad had to get the team of horses and go back out and pull that car home. So, you know, right now, today, most people have no idea of what you went through to do things. For instance, that Model T Ford in the wintertime, a little bit hard to start. First thing, the Model T Ford did not have a battery. There was no starter. It had a crank out in the front end of it. The first thing you did, you took and you filled that radiator with hot water, and then you covered it over so it wouldn't freeze. And sometimes you had to put a jack under the back so the back wheel would turn so it would have so much resistance. So I feel that I had a really wonderful bringing up. My dad was a stern, fair, and a loving dad, and my mother too. So now if you want to.
Laura, you got any questions for him?
Well, I do have a question, Dad. You were living, Grandpa and Grandma were living in Tamarack before you were born. Explain, how come she had you in Walker?
Okay, Walker, of course, is quite a ways away, and she she would have a problem if she had to go to be at home out there where no road or anything, and that. Sure, there was a hospital in Aiken 30 miles away, but she would not have a way to stay in Aiken waiting for that blessed day.
Right.
In Walker, she had a brother and a sister. They were twins, but they were older, and so she went up to Walker and she stayed with them until that day, and then she stayed there for about 2 weeks before she came home.
And didn't she take the train?
Well, I think, I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, she had to take first Dad had to bring her into Tamarack to meet the train. She would take the NP train west to McGregor, and then she got on the Sioux Line train going to Walker.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay. And one more thing. You had mentioned Grandpa had come from Sweden, but you said 1922. We need to correct that. What year did Grandpa come to America? Do you remember?
Well, I think it was in 1922.
You were born in 22.
I'm sorry. My mouth was in gear before my brain was.
No, that's okay.
1912.
1912. Okay. And okay, the chronological 1912. Grandpa went. Didn't he come over by boat?
Yes.
Okay, and when did he get drafted?
Well, he was in 1918. He was in the service.
Okay,
I
so
don't
he
know
was.
if he went in 1917 or.
But
what.
he was kind of drafted in those days, right?
Yeah.
And did he speak English then?
Dad learned to speak and write English at an early age.
Okay,
He had the determination,
right.
and he turned out he could speak well. He had wonderful handwriting.
And one more thing, I remember you telling me the story that Grandpa he only came with his accordion? What was that story?
Yeah, he brought a button box accordion along.
From Sweden?
Yeah,
Okay, okay. Yeah, I just wanted those stories because
and
those
I think that burned in that house fire.
Oh, did it? Okay. But he came alone too, correct? His brother wasn't with him.
His brother came with him. Yes.
Oh, he did. Okay, okay.
His brother was was younger.
So we have a
Or-
World War I veteran is his father, and Dad is a World War II veteran. It's a pretty cool story. Okay,
Yeah.
let's see. Where could we go from here? Your teen years.
My teen years, okay. In 19, I'm gonna step back to 1929. I remember the day that my dad went to Tamarack to the bank. On the door was a sign, closed. Everybody that had money in that bank lost every cent. He didn't have much money in there, but you know, a little bit of money back in those years went a long ways. Yeah. But now in 1930, the highway number 210 was built past our place. And that opened up a road that came from south of us from the Finnish community. Up on this, till this time, there was no way of communicating with our neighbors to the south. And now that road came through. Then I got to start playing and associating with some of the kids from the Finnish community. Wonderful people. In 1930, our barn burned from a lightning strike. You talk about help that came from that Finnish community. Now, that happened on the 3rd of October. So all our hay is gone. Fortunately, the weather was warm enough, so he left the cattle outside that night. So there were no livestock lost. But the barn was lost. He went down into the swamp area and cut long poles and made a shed roof over that foundation. That Finnish community again came to his help. And they made that so that he could have his cattle inside. But ordinarily there's hay in the loft above above, And that is an insulator. The heat from that down below won't go up. That winter, we lost most of the young stock. But that shows what strong man was. That next year then, he built a new barn on the same foundation. But it needed concrete on the outside of the existing foundation. A bunch of those young Finnish boys were there wheeling concrete. And they helped build that barn up again. Now, being my dad was a blacksmith, he would do blacksmithing for those people. Never took a dime. They would bring their plowshares over, and he would heat them up on the forge and pound them out. See, they didn't grind them off, because if you grind it, the metal is gone. But he could heat them up, and he'd pound that edge till it was sharp. And during my early years, I used to enjoy going out and watching him do that. So now we have a barn again. Now, in 1930, he bought a Model A two-door. I would go out and I just admired that Model A. I would spend hours looking at that Model A. It was, you know, when you didn't have much, you appreciated everything like that. Now, during when I was a teenager and I would go back in that Finnish community, and we would ski down the hills, we'd skate on the lakes out there and that. And then I got into 4-H. I was a 4-H member for 9 years. And it was good. All those people were so dedicated and honest and trustworthy, and that it was fun. So I can't say enough about that little community there. In the middle of the summer of 36, well, then my dad bought a 36 Ford. And of course now, all these years, I've had to participate in doing chores. I was milking cows, I was mowing hay and driving, and eventually we had a tractor. It was a Ford steel-wheeled tractor. It just beat you to drive it and that, but I did. We had to be careful if you got that thing stuck. Don't let it tip over backwards. Anyway, I worked in the fields. I mowed hay, I raked hay. I would, and even when I was younger, I'd be up in that wagon, tramping the hay down while my dad was pitching it on. And then my dad would you know, he could keep you going because he would have something to do that you would like. He'd take us out to Round Lake swimming. Oh, that was a big treat. And then there was another thing that we would go to. In Cromwell, they had what they called a Kaler Players. It was a vaudeville in that hall that they had there. That Kaler Players would go from town to town to town, and they had, each week they had a different play. All good plays. Nothing that was risque or anything like that. There was a lot of humor, and it was fun. And I, up until a few years ago, I could name some of those plays, and and then of course during the summer, we would go to the fireworks up by Round Lake. They put on quite a fireworks, and so my dad had a way of rewarding us. Well, one thing I gotta go back a notch here. I forgot about my brother Bal's birthday, March 15, 1927, and of course we had a Model T then yet. And another thing about that Model T, whenever you went someplace, you better have an extra tire. You had to have your tire iron. You had to have patches. You had to, you know, because the tires weren't like they are today. Anyway, this one time, the first time I saw my brother, we went. You know, it was quite a trip then that time to get there, and I got there, and it's a Beecroft Hospital. It was nothing more than a big house, frame building. And Mrs. Beecroft, I remember her, she took me out into the hallway, and she says, "Lester, you see that square up in the ceiling?" She said, "That's where the stork brought Melvin." And of course, but before that, you know, we always used to see that big bird, you know, flying there with with his beak and a diaper or whatever. And I was amazed. Now times are different today. Then, of course, all during this time, there's a depression. People didn't have any money. Farmers took a beating because then there was that big dust bowl that took the farmers out of business in the Midwest and that. And there used to be people going by our place. You know, our place is, you know, 300-400 feet off the highway and that, and they called them gypsies. They would come up and beg for food and things like that, and sometimes she would size them up, and she says, "Well, I tell you, you go out there to that wood pile and you split wood while I'm making you a sandwich." She never turned anybody down in the end. She would always give them something. But some of these gypsies would raid the chicken coop at night and that. So, my mother rigged up this thing in the chicken coop. She has a wash tub above the door with a bunch of rocks on them. And all you had to do was step inside and it would trip the rocks. It was a very quiet evening after dark, and we heard a racket out in the chicken coop. There was chickens were making all kinds of racket, and there was somebody that was planting one foot behind the other as fast as he could get to the highway. So I guess during all those years, I'm very happy that I lived through them like we did.
Yeah.
What happened when you were in your 20s? Were you still on the farm? Did you leave? When did you leave the farm?
I left the farm and, well, okay. In 1941, I bought a truck. And I hauled pulpwood to Cloquet. That was a time when you did not have all this automated equipment to handle that pulpwood. You had to load every stick up on that truck, and when you got to Cloquet, you had to unload every stick. And I did that until I went in the service in '42.
When you were hauling the wood chips, were you living on the farm at that time, or living someplace else?
Yeah, I stayed at home.
Okay.
Because I helped out on the farm too. Yeah. But I would go up in the woods and I'd load up that load in the evening. I'd put jacks under it. In the morning I'd leave it. I'd be down at the scaler shack at 8 o'clock in the morning. And then I'd go back up and load another one.
So were you 20 when you went into the service?
Yeah.
20 years old.
1942, I was 20.
Okay.
Hi.
Hi,
Who am I talking to?
I am Irene Johnson.
Now, you're not kidding me. Are you married to Lester?
I am.
Oh, we're going to have some great stories, I think. Laura,
I'm not a good storyteller,
well, it doesn't matter.
and my memory's bad too.
Well, Laurie will ask some questions
Yeah.
about the past and so where you were born and so
Yeah,
forth.
she can.
Thank you for doing this.
Mom, when were you born? What was the date of your birthday?
I was born August 20th, 1927, at the Beecroft Hospital in Aiken.
The same one that Melvin was born at, Dad's
Right.
brother.
And I weighed 8 pounds and 2 ounces.
Okay. Did you have brothers and sisters at that time?
No, I was the oldest one in the family, and the first one.
Okay. And tell us a little bit about your earliest memories, as far back as you can go. You don't have to give us dates, just things that come out in your memory of when you were young and what it was like to be on the farm and your mom and dad. A little bit about your mother and father.
Okay. My mother and father were both very hard workers. My dad had been a deputy sheriff for a while, and we lived a little bit south of Tamarack in a house there for about 3 years. And that house the frame is still standing there. And then we moved from there to the farm south of Tamarack. That was about 5 miles south. And then my parents they had a garden and grew potatoes. I remember picking potato bugs off the potato plants
Whoa.
because there used to be so many bugs. And
When you were growing up, did they speak Finnish?
yes, sometimes they used to speak Finnish, thinking that we wouldn't understand it all. But we learned to speak Finnish when we were young. And in fact, my youngest brother he spoke Finnish till he went to school. And after that, then he had to learn English. But there were 6 in my family, 4 girls and 2 boys. The girls were the oldest, and I was the oldest. And 2 of my sisters are gone now. My youngest sister passed away on my 90th birthday. And the boys were the youngest.
And what was a typical day when you were a young child? What was a typical day? Did you have to help milk the cows?
Yes, we used to go out and help milk cows, and then we had to work in the garden and take care of different things on the farm, pick berries. We had a strawberry field, and we used to go up blueberry picking with my mother. She loved to pick berries, so we'd go way back in the woods and pick blueberries.
And I remember you telling me a story where you wore flour sacks. Didn't your mother make your clothes?
Yes, my mother used to do the sewing because our flour came in pretty sacks, and she would make us dresses out of those. And then we had an aunt that was working in California for some wealthy people, and she would send some clothes from there for us, and then my mom would try and fix them. She'd sew them from the middle to shorten them and stuff, so we got some different clothes from there. And then mostly when we were in school, we wore bib overalls with sweaters. And my mother was a knitter. She had a knitting machine, and she would knit us woolen socks that came way over up to the thighs up here. And that's what we wore then, because there were no snowmobile suits or anything then.
No.
So
And how did you get to school?
I walked to school. I went to the red brick school. It was a one-room school, but we were fortunate. They had a bathroom for the boys and a bathroom with facilities in the school.
Oh, they had plumbing?
Plumbing, or
Oh.
just, well, they were simple. I went 1 year to Rice Lake School, which was much closer for us, but the county line was between us, so we had to walk to the red brick. And that was so much closer for us to go to Rice River or Rice Lake, and we really enjoyed that. The teacher there lived in the school building, and then we'd always walk there and had outside games. We played anti-eye over, fox and the geese, kick the can, different games that we played. And then when there was snow, we'd go out and make angels.
Good,
Yeah.
clean fun. Just good old fun.
It was.
How far was the school from where you lived?
The red brick school was 2 miles,
Okay.
and we walked there. And when it was cold, sometimes my parents would take us. And I remember one time it was very cold out, and my parents had decided that I shouldn't go to school that day. But I got dressed and I made a lunch and started walking to school, way below zero. And my neighbors along the way stopped me and told me to come in and warm up, and because they knew it was cold. And otherwise, we usually walked.
Well, you had to have pants to keep warm. Did your mother make the pants? Were they heavy or light or?
Well, we had suspender overalls that we wore with sweaters, and then we had coats, and
Were the pants made of wool or cotton, do you recall?
they were regular overalls.
Okay.
Yeah. And then, of course, we had the long woolen stockings that we wore, and we had sweaters. So,
When you were young, did your family have a car?
we had a Model A, and I remember going to visit my aunt and uncle in Cromwell, Minnesota, and that was a big day. It was a day-long trip to get there, and we'd visit my aunt and uncle in Cromwell, and we used to just love to go there. But that took the whole day. And I remember when we went, there was what they called a sinkhole on a road south of Tamarack. And you could not go through that all the time. So we had to turn around. And I remember getting into the car, and I was scared then, and I slammed the door, and I got my mother's fingers in there. And I felt so bad.
I remember you've told that story. I thought there was also one where you were afraid of a turtle. What's the
There was
turtle story?
There was a turtle out there that we had looked at, and
Oh, so it's the same story. You
Yeah.
saw the turtle and you
yeah,
slammed the door. Oh,
and got her fingers in there.
yeah, yeah.
Now, how do we ask this question? At what point did she meet Lester? Before or after the war?
After the war.
Well, no, I had known Les before.
Oh, before World War
He
II?
used to come threshing at our place.
Oh,
They did what?
He did threshing
Oh, sure.
with his dad, and he used to come with his dad there. So I had known him quite a few years
Okay, all right.
when he was younger too. And I went to school with his brother. I graduated with Les's brother from high school. And
When she
then-
was dragged under a
Now, where did you go to high school at? What town?
McGregor, Minnesota,
McGregor, Minnesota?
same school that Les went to. And
Okay, and that was how far? A couple miles? That's the different school then you went to grade school.
that, yeah,
Different building, correct?
yes. we
How
went-
far was that from where you lived?
Well, the red brick school was out in the country. And then we went to school in McGregor, this village of McGregor. where we went to high school, through high school there.
Mom, there's a story I think you need to tell about the hay rake. And about how old were you?
I was a teenager. I used to have to help make hay, and I was raking hay with the horses. You know, the rake, the dump rake. And the bridle fell off the horses, and they got scared, and they ran away. And there I was on this hay rake, and I hung on to the lines as tight as I could. And then I could hear my dad. My mother was on the stack, and my dad had been pitching hay to my mother, and I would rake it up to the stack with the horses, and they got scared and they ran away, and I was hanging on to the lines, and they dragged me with those lines around, quite a ways around, and I could hear my dad saying, "Let go of the lines, let go," because it was just dragging me
The horses were dragging you on the ground?
on the ground.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. And this hay rake. And then I finally let go of the lines, and the rake went over the stack, and I was left there. So I didn't get into that rake.
The stack, you mean the hay stack that
Hay
it was?
stack.
If that wasn't there, it would have gone over you, right?
Yeah,
Oh,
it would have.
no.
But I lucked out there because I let go at the right time. Otherwise, that hay rake would have rolled me around.
Now, how about your teen years? Did you still stay on the farm?
Well, when I got old enough, I went to work at the co-op store in Tamarack. And a friend of mine, Helen Mila, also worked at the other grocery store. And the first year when we were living together, we lived upstairs of the Swedbergs, and we had one room up there.
And which town is this?
Tamarack.
Oh, right in Tamarack.
Yes. And after we were both working at one of the stores in Tamarack, and then the manager of the co-op store moved. So then my friend and I moved upstairs of the store, and I worked at that store, and she worked at the other one in town.
How far was the store from your farm?
That was about 5 miles.
About 5 miles?
Yeah.
How many years did you stay in the co-op upstairs?
I think it was just a little over a year.
Okay.
But we used to have to make coffee at Christmas time for the patrons, and then I used to be able to lift feed sacks and put them in their cars, and they weighed 100 pounds, and now I can't lift 10 pounds.
100-pound haystack. My gosh. You must have had muscles. Any young man come around, you could box him.
Wait, what?
If any young men came around, you could box them. If you could lift 100-pound, holy moly. I can't lift 100-pound hay.
Don't
Now you
mess
don't.
with my mom.
No.
But I used to load it.
Do you have any particular moment that was exceptionally important to you, or something that scared you so bad you'll never do it again? You can tell me, because now the statute of limitations are up and nobody can come after you.
I didn't get that.
Oh, I was teasing you.
He was saying, is there ever an episode where you were real afraid or just trying to bring back memories
Yeah. I can't-
other than the turtle?
The turtle, yeah. Well, I've always been afraid of snakes.
Oh,
and
who
I
isn't?
don't like snakes. But I can't.
I don't have any other questions.
No, I think we're,
Now, is there anything you want to tell me you haven't told Lori or Lester? Anything from the past that was exciting for you?
The what?
Anything that was exciting? You go to any dances, any place?
Oh, yes. After I met him, or I had known him, and after he came home from the service, I had gone to a dance with my cousins. It was a wedding dance for somebody. And then, being I had gone with my cousins, Les came up to me and asked if he could take me home that night. So that was our first date. He brought me home, and when I got home, it was kind of interesting because I had gotten a new baby brother, and he was crying when I got home, and I remember that so plainly.
he was born that night?
No,
Oh, okay.
no, he was very, I can't remember the dates, but he was born in March,
Okay.
and I think he was only a week or so old, and he was crying when I got home, but I got used to that.
Oh,
And then I have to tell you about when my youngest sister was born. When my mother was pregnant, it was always a secret and nobody knew much about it. She wore, I can't think of what,
baggy clothes.
bigger clothes and that. But she had my youngest sister at home with a midwife. The midwife came over and my sister and I were so curious, wondering what was going on in that bedroom. And then after quite a while later, then here comes somebody to tell us that we have a sister. But we had no idea what was going on in that bedroom. But the midwife helped her have her baby. And
Mom, do you remember when war was declared, what it was like on the farm in the Tamarack? Do you remember?
well, I remember.
How did you know the war was on? Did you have a radio, any chance, back
We
then?
had a radio, but that wasn't, I think somebody came and told us
Okay.
that there was war.
Was there any kind of local paper for the area, maybe once a week paper or something?
We had a Finnish paper, Minnesotan Uutiset. That was a Finnish paper. It came from New York Mills. And my parents used to read that. And then in later years, we had the Aiken Independent Age that we got, which we still get.
Were radios very popular back then, or only a few farms had radios?
Some of them had radios, but my parents' home, that was burned during the 1918 fire. And my grandparents and I remember my dad, they had gone and laid in furrows that were plowed when the fire went through. And fortunately, our neighbor's house was saved. So a lot of the people gathered over there. Some of them went into the river, and while the fire went through, to get saved.
What's this fire called? Is this the Hinckley fire?
Hinckley, 1918.
Oh, Hinckley fire. Oh, yes. Very,
Yes,
very tragic.
that was, and my grandparents' house was burnt then. But
How close were you to Hinckley, then, the city of Hinckley?
Oh, that's,
10 miles?
oh, it's quite a bit further.
Okay.
I can't remember. Les, do you remember?
Yeah.
The Hinckley, how far is that?
How far is Hinckley from Tamarack?
Oh, well, Hinckley is west of Brainerd, and Brainerd
Oh.
is, this is the Moose Lake fire.
Oh, it was the
Yeah.
Moose Lake fire,
Yeah, that's
not the Hink.
Yeah, this is a bigger one.
There
Yeah.
were a lot of people killed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hundreds of people killed in that
Yeah.
fire.
There
Yeah.
was a
Yeah.
lot of people. Some neighbors south and east of our place went in a cellar and they all died.
Oh, terrible.
There was a lot of deaths in that fire.
Yeah, Moose Lake one.
So now after Dad got out of the service and you and he brought you home from that dance, is that the first time you went on the date? That was 3 months after he got back?
I guess it was.
And then you got married a year after that. So this year, June 14th, Flag Day, is going to be your 74th
Right.
wedding anniversary.
74th wedding anniversary.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Okay.
And then, yeah, if we could,
We'll
Just-
just stop here for a second.
yeah.
What do you have in your hand? What is that?
I have a pair of skates that my dad made. They were made from a spring from a buggy. And you can see that he had to curl this in a forge. He had it heated up and that all the cutting and that is all done by hand.
What kept your foot in there? You have it tied with a rope or something?
Pardon?
What kept it on your foot? Do you have a rope
Oh,
around
there
it?
was some straps. A strap went through here and a strap went through there, and then they were kind of laced on.
What is this picture you have here? Is that you in the picture?
Now that's me in the picture, and the other person is my grandmother. It was taken in 1943 when I had come home on furlough.
Now I see what looks like is two baby shoes. Were those yours?
They were my shoes from when I was just a little tyke.
Now that looks like a copy of a Model T or Model A?
Well, I think it was a 1927 Model A.
Did you make that?
Oh, no, I about wore it out. The axles are actually worn way up in. The wheels are just about touching the fenders. I had played a lot with that. And one day my brother, Mal, hit me on the head with that thing. And he was kind of laughing and that, but pretty soon the blood was running down my side of my face, and he ended up heading for the house just as fast as he could go. Yeah.
Why do you have this old license plate?
Well, that license plate is dated 1922.
I see it in the corner here, 1922.
Yep.
A little hard to see. Why is this significant? Is this your birthday or something?
Just because that's my birthday.
Is that from World War II?
That is a Walther's P-32, P-38, and it was a handgun that sort of replaced the Luger because the Luger was so finely made and that, and they couldn't keep up production, I don't think. I was fortunate in getting this off a German officer prisoner.
Okay, we'll get into that in a moment. Turn that around so I can see it. No, leave the cover down. Turn it this way. Okay, like that. Yeah, I want to see the insignia on here. World War II came along. How did you know that World War II had started?
Well, it was on the news, on the radios and that, and we had a radio.
You had a radio on the farm. Okay, now that you know about it, did you enlist or did you get drafted?
No, I enlisted I enlisted September 21st in 1942, and I was inducted October 15th, 1942. And
Where did you enlist at?
I enlisted in Duluth.
Okay, now, what time of the year was this? Winter or summer you
It
enlisted?
was October.
Okay.
Yep.
When you enlisted, how much time did you have to spend at home before you were going to boot camp?
Well, I enlisted 21st of September, and I was inducted October 15th.
Where'd you go for basic training?
Well, I had a kind of a different trail than a lot of them. I was sent directly down to Texas to Tarrant Field first, and from Tarrant Field I went to Midland Field, Texas, and it was a bombardier training school, and they were so short of help on the flight lines, I didn't even have basic training. I reported to a crew chief by the name of Jack D. Andrews he was from Texas. He was a tech sergeant, and he was in charge of this one particular plane. It was a B-34 twin-engine bomber. It was a bomber that they had built for England, and he took me out and she showed me how to do different things on that. It was kind of interesting because he had two big manuals, and he'd go through and then how to pre-flight and what to do, what basically had to do. We didn't do any large maintenance of that, but we made some minor adjustments.
How much time did you spend in Texas doing this?
About 8 months.
Okay, and then from where? Then where'd you go?
Well, during this time, I would fly with the plane over the bombing ranges, and I would record the hits and misses. We would bomb anywhere from a few hundred feet to some over 12,000 feet.
Now, once you did all this, and the 8 months are up, where did they send you?
Well, okay. At about 8 months, I got my name showed up on a roster of about 250 others to report for a test. We didn't have any idea what it was all about. And I tried my best. There was a lot of math and covered a lot of territory. And in about a week, I got orders to go to be shipped out. There were 29 of us that apparently passed that test out of the 250. And I went to Vanderbilt University under what they call the Army Specialized Training Program. It was an engineering program, pre-engineering program. And I was there about 10 months, and then the government closed the program down. And for one thing, I thought, well, maybe I can get back into the Air Force through the aviation cadet program. And see, by now, I qualified for flight instruction. But the quota for pilots at that time were full, so I couldn't go there. I went to the 106th Infantry Division, and I trained an H Company, which is the heavy machine guns, mortars, and so on. And I was there about 2 weeks training. Then I was sent to the 285th Combat Engineers in Camp Crowder, Missouri. And I went through basic training on, well, actually more than basic. From Camp Crowder, I went to Camp Campbell, Kentucky, and from there to Camp Shelby, Mississippi, and from there to New York to be shipped out.
Okay, you're in New York. They've got you bouncing all over the place in the Army. Do you know where you're going to be shipped to before you get on the boat?
We had no idea. No.
Okay, now you're on the ship. You're going somewhere.
We were going somewhere, so we were headed east, I guess. We were in a victory ship, and we were on that victory ship about, I think, 12 days or something like that, and we ended up in England. And we trained in England. Now, during this time, even from Camp Shelby, Mississippi, I was one of 9 that was selected for mines and booby traps and explosives. And so I trained in Mississippi, I trained in England, and I was sent out of England to Epernay, France. This was at about the time the bulge hit, and we were training at Camp Everbury. Camp at Epernay, France, for about 3 or 4 days. Our outfit was still in England.
What was your training about?
German mines.
Okay.
German mines. In fact, I'm going to back up a notch. While we were in England, there was a bunch of us. Well, there was 9 from my battalion, and I don't know what, maybe another dozen or so. And we were, I'm sitting in the first row, and this lieutenant was going through this, explaining the Tellermine 35, which is the German anti-tank mine. They had millions of them, and he spun this cover off this mine, and it popped it wet. Now, if that there's in that mine there's a donut-shaped charge of about 3/4 ounce or something like that. That's very sensitive. If that donut had been in there, I wouldn't be here today. No, neither would anybody else around. And there are possibilities that can go off without that donut in it. But anyway, at Epernay, France, we trained some more on, there's two different kinds of minefields. There's the one deliberate minefield, which is very exacting, and the other is a hasty one where you just pace it off, like that. That's when you don't have enough time to do a lot of intricate measuring, because these minefields are supposed to be identified some way. You should be able to find the first mine and find them, all from there on. And so I was out ahead of my outfit for a few days, and then when my outfit came, we were what they called Patton's Ghost Army. And the reason for that is that they were doing some deceiving of the Germans. In other words, we were constantly on the move. Therefore, the Germans thought there was a lot of people out there. Our line was so thin that they could have walked right through us, But because all of this activity, the Germans weren't going to make a flank movement. We, along with another combat engineer battalion, built a pontoon bridge. This pontoon bridge was somewhere north of the Remagen bridge that you hear so much about. Yeah. And it didn't take us very long to put that, I bet we put that bridge across in 2 hours. Because we were working upstream where we lowered the pontoons and the treadways on them, and then they floated them down and connected them up, caught them in the current. They had a line on them, of course, so they wouldn't get away. And then they would connect them up. And because there was 2 battalions doing this, it didn't take long to get across. And I was across that river there shortly before the first tank got across. And from there on, it was kind of a rat race across Germany. Some days you could they would go 20 miles, sometimes more, a few times not very far. One night, this was in Germany after we got across the Rhine, there was a we got to this town and we were gonna stay overnight in that town. And so, but there was, see, now you're starting to run through the civilians, you know, and that. And there were a few civilians in that town, and they said there's about 300 German soldiers out there, and they're going to be coming back into town. So we set up our perimeter defenses on machine. Well, I don't know, we must have had 3, 4 machine guns out there, and everything was quiet for a while in the evening, and then we could detect some noises, and the machine gun next to where I was hollered out, "Halt! Halt!" There was no response. He just kept hearing somebody moving out there. So he just let out a blast of that machine gun, and then we could see him headed the other direction. In the morning, or when it got daylight, they went out, there was a body out there. And they went out there and they dragged this body in. It was a kid about 15 years old. And what he was the decoy. They had him out front. Which,
Yep.
I mean, think about it.
They had young kids.
Desperate, very desperate.
That's so desperate, yeah. So that day then, we saw something way out there, about 1,000 yards or better. So we went out there, and we got to where the woods where we saw them last. And we are kind of on guard in a way, and we're spread out. We're maybe 12, 15 feet apart or better. And all of a sudden, the fellow next to me, Elmer Anderson, I heard him shoot, and then there was another explosion over there and it was kind of out of I couldn't see what was going on. And what it was, there was this German officer, SS, this was the SS officer, had a hand grenade, those potato mashers we call them.
Yep.
He was going to throw that at me. I didn't see him because it was kind of out of around the corner or something. And Elmer Anderson fired that shot and caught the guy right here. And what he did then was he pulled that in his, automatically what he got. He pulled that thing, and that hand grenade exploded, of course, and it blew him in parts too. So I was pretty lucky there. But when that happened, the others came out of that woods holding white flags and didn't have any weapons or anything. There were about 300 of them gave up to us, and there was only about 12 of us there.
Oh, man.
You know.
So what did you do with them then? Did you march them someplace?
We had a couple guys take them back, and they, I can't remember just exactly what
When you say taken back from where you were, how far?
Oh, we went back to that town
Oh,
with them, and there was another outfit that would pick up prisoners.
outfit just assigned to that, just to do that.
Pardon?
There was an outfit that just picked up prisoners and brought them back to
Yeah,
wherever.
there were some, that's what they did. They usually had somebody that would take them back to a
Holding area.
holding area.
Were you aware at the time that how many German prisoners were sent to the States and Minnesota?
No, no.
At the
I
time,
don't.
you didn't know that, okay.
No, no. From there on, we went into, well, we built a big bridge across the Isar River, which was north of, I can't remember now. Anyway, my job was to build a bent out in the middle of that river.
Build a what?
I had to build 2 bents or structures out in the middle of that river.
Okay.
You see, the old river had been, the old bridge had been demolished.
Yeah.
There was a bunch of steel on the outside, on that.
Well, anyway, the Ghost Army played a big part.
Yeah, yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
you went through all of this. Where did you end up when you're moving through the countryside? You got the
Okay.
bridge built, and then where'd you go?
Well, one close call was when we were going through Regensburg, Germany. We were out front of the tanks because the tanks couldn't get through there. There were boxcars in the street and everything, for the blasting. Well, anyway, we got this D8 cat, and I was about 6 feet ahead of that tank. That bulldozer. And the sniper took a shot and just missed my legs and ricocheted off that dozer blade. But there in that town, the bombing had been really doing a lot of damage. And there was a house, and we were about a block and a half or so away from it. And on that house, the side was all gone. There's a stairway going. You could, it's just like one of these little kids' playhouses and that. And that stairway. There were 2 men carrying a body down that step. Yeah,
Were they German?
Were they German?
there was Germans. Yeah,
German.
that was the German community. Regensburg, yes.
Yeah, but that was 2 Germans carrying a 3rd German down.
Yeah, I don't know if it was a man or a woman that he
okay.
was carrying down.
Now you're going through. What area of Germany are you in now? You've got the bridge up. Where are you going?
We were across the bridge,
Okay. What's that area called?
Rhineland.
And from Rhineland you went where?
After that, after the Rhine River,
Yeah.
we just kept. Well, we missed Maine. In fact, we had to build a bridge across the Maine River. It wasn't very wide. It was, well, maybe just about from here to the lake,
Right.
almost.
But you made this so tanks could go across it?
So we could get tanks across.
Okay.
There was a railroad bridge there but the railroad bridge is so damaged we couldn't use it. And my job was to prepare the roadway out to the river, and they were. I had truck hauling stuff there, and they kept on. We already got some pontoons out there, but the shells would blast them out. So we got a hold of the artillery, and they had a guy, a lieutenant, that came out there, and he was listening when that gun would explode, and then when it went off, and then he would clock it when it was landing, and where the direction was. Coming to find out, there was a woman in a building across the way. That was about, I suppose that building was 2 blocks or less, and it was on the other side of the river. There was a woman that was calling the shots. So we sent a bunch of guys over there, well, 3 actually, with a pontoon, and silenced her, of course. That's not, I mean, it seems cruel, but it's
Yep.
war.
Yep, yep.
It's war, yeah. And there's times that things happen that's kind of funny in a way. Well, anyway, we got up the ways, and the company commander told me, he says, Sergeant Johnson, he said, there's a safe in that building over there. It apparently had been some military headquarters of some kind, but it was about the size of a big 3-room house. Yeah. So he said, "Can you open that?" I said, "I don't know if I've never tried opening a safe before." So I proceeded. I put a couple of pounds of composition C2 on it and a bag of dirt over it, and bang. And I had a fellow with me, helping me, and he's standing underneath the eaves of that house. Now this house had the clay tile roof. And I can still see him today, standing there. Then he was like this, that chunks of that clay tile was bouncing off his helmet. But in the long story short, I got it on the third blast. There were 2 walls still standing on that building. It was made like a pumice block, so it was pretty fragile in a way. A frame building might have had some parts standing, but this only had a couple of quarters.
Did you get the safe all the way open?
I got the safe open.
And what was
and
inside?
There was a bunch of paper in there that we turned over to G2.
Yeah.
There was a bunch of money in there. We didn't know if it was any good. I turned the money over to the company, and they found out that it was okay, and after the war they bought beer with it.
Where were you when the war was coming to an end?
Well,
how'd you know it was coming?
I got a story about that bridge that we built.
Okay.
When I got this stuff done, of course, then they put the bridge across. The bridge was about 160 feet long. But I'm out there cleaning up this, or not cleaning up, but I'm preparing to clean up that steel that was on it. So I was loading up 120 pounds of TNT on it to blast it away. But I was out there, and here I heard this. So this is horse running down the street. See, now we're running all over civilians, you know, running right through. And here I looked up, and there's this horse coming along on the other side of the river. There was a street that went across along the river, and then this bridge came across this way. And I looked up, and there's this horse in midair. I can still see his eyes and his mouth wide open. He's up in the, and he's 20 feet up in the air. And he fell down in that broken up bridge. The bridge is laying like this, and then he bounced off that and down into the water. And I thought, oh boy. So, and then here comes the guy. Oh, nein, mein Pferd. Pferd is horse in German. Oh, mein Pferd. And we had a little Jew guy that talked Jew. I told him, I said, do you give him 5 minutes to get that horse out of there, or he said, we're going to shoot the thing. We can't be monkeying around with it. Well, then the better part of me thought, well, let's help him. So we had a bunch of guys that went over there, and they had rubber boats and that. And they got that horse standing up on something. It had a big bruise on its shoulder, but no broken bones. And they pushed that horse off into that deep water, and that horse swam across that river against about an 8-mile current. And there was a ramp going up on this side, and that horse threw his tail in the air, and away he went. Now, he's on one side of the river, and that owner, he's on the other side. Yeah. Well, anyway, we got the bridge across by 3 o'clock in the morning, and the tanks were on their way across, too.
Dad, when you were building these bridges, did you meet a lot of resistance from the Germans? Or had they already?
In fact, this bridge, we were shelled 3 times, but it didn't cause any damage.
Okay.
There was a big building across the way, and one shell hit by that. One had hit down in the water off from where we were working, and then the other one went way back someplace else.
And another thing I wanted you to talk about is you had gone to, your group had gone to like 3 or 4 concentration camps. Was it after this bridge?
We were at 2 concentration camps and 2 POW camps that I can remember. The concentration camps they had been, I would imagine, Poles, probably Russians, I don't know. And they had been worked to death almost. In fact, they had a lot of them had died. In one case, outside of this one town, there was a structure there that was probably 200 to 300 feet long, and it was like hog pens with little cubicles like that. And what that was a facility where they had these prisoners in each one of these, and they were making cobblestone. They would bring the bigger pieces of stone and put it up there, and then this guy would be making those cobblestones. The cobblestones was the material that they were putting in their superhighway and whatever. And what they did then, they worked them practically to death and didn't feed them enough and that. And I can still see some of these. They'd bring their bodies out and they'd stack them up out in the woods. It looked like a cordwood pile. And I could still, this one person made an impression on me. We weren't supposed to feed them, of course.
You know why that was? It would kill them.
No, you couldn't feed them
They couldn't eat food.
You would probably kill them by
Yeah.
feeding them.
Yeah.
And there was this one, and he was crawling on the ground, and he reached out his hand like that. You know, he was hardly could raise his hand, but just like, give me
Please.
food, please,
Oh.
and that. Yeah, and you could smell these camps a quarter of a mile away if the wind was right. It's just rotten.
Were they still locked in there, Dad?
They weren't locked in anymore. No,
But they had
the
nowhere to
the guards had all taken off,
Okay.
and and of course we couldn't talk their language or anything like that. But the ones that had American soldiers in, one of them had a lot of British that had been taken when Dunkirk failed. So they had been in there for about 6 years.
Oh.
And they were, of course, them British were so happy, you know. They thanked those Yanks for coming on through. And they would say that they knew something was happening because about 2 days before we got there, the guards had all taken off. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Did you visit more than one camp? Did you visit just one camp?
No, we had one American camp, one British, mostly British. I don't know, there might have been others in there, but most of them I think were British. But in the Americans, there was Air Force, of course. You know, a lot of those bombers were shot down, and yeah.
But then you were at two of them where the Polish Jewish people were probably?
I don't know what there
Yeah.
could have been some Jewish.
Did you visit more than one camp or just that one you were at?
No, we were two, like I said, we were 2 concentration camps and 2 POW camps.
And you had to go to all of them?
No, we just happened to be there. That's
Oh,
all.
okay. You
Yeah.
happened
Yeah.
upon
Came
it.
upon them, probably.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, we had to keep moving on.
Were you one of the first groups that had come to those camps?
I couldn't answer that.
Okay.
Where were you when the war was ending?
I was in Czechoslovakia, about 30 miles into Czechoslovakia.
Doing what? Demolition?
We were still chasing Germans, but then now the Germans are going back the other way, because they were giving up to us. They didn't want to be a Russian prisoner.
Yeah. How did you know that Hitler killed himself?
I don't know.
So when the war was coming to an end,
Yeah.
how'd you know this?
How did we know?
Yeah, it's
Well,
coming
of
to.
course, that came up through channels in a hurry.
Okay.
Yeah, but then after the war was over, we moved back. Well, we were in Austria for a while. Then we moved to a town of Plattling, Germany, where we built a POW camp. We had to build a camp, and we had 6 weeks' time to build that camp to hold 20,000 people. And I was in charge of a bunch of sawmills and lumber yards and that, and then I got sick. Oh, I was sick. My throat was swelling shut, and I ended up in the Passau 110th Evac Hospital in Passau, Germany, and I had diphtheria. Then I died.
So you ended up in the hospital.
Yeah, oh yeah,
In what town?
Passau.
Passed out?
Passau.
And once you got better, then they start shipping you back to England?
Well, you see, we had to be under quarantine. I had to be under quarantine. They wouldn't let me go out of there. And I guess there was other GIs that had diphtheria that were in there. I was in there 6 weeks.
Then what happened next?
Well,
After you
then
got out?
my outfit was shipped out. The 285th was shipped out.
Back to the States? Shipped out to where?
I don't know
Okay.
where they went. Then I joined up with the 242nd Combat Engineers, and I was with them until I got shipped out. And I didn't have any duties. I did a lot of hunting. I was trying to gain my strength because I had lost a lot of weight. And so I hunted deer. I shot 20-some deer while I was there. We brought them back to the mess hall, and the guys loved them.
I bet they would.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, one thing, Dad, I think is kind of interesting. How close did you get to Berlin? Because you've mentioned this, the U.S. had to stop and let the Russians go, because you've told me this
Oh.
story.
Yeah, I don't know. We're quite a ways south.
Okay, but you were
Yeah.
told that you couldn't go in.
But yeah.
The Russians had
Well,
to
that's
go in.
the Americans got the message that they couldn't go into Berlin. They had to let the Russians in. But we didn't play any part in that
Oh,
because
okay.
we were south.
Okay.
Well, we didn't even know. Some of the times you didn't know what was going on. You know, we had no way of finding out.
Right.
You know, and the other thing, nowadays, they take pictures and they do all kinds of newsreels of combat in different places. Back then, I couldn't even tell my folks where I was.
Yeah. Well-
In fact, I tried to tell them this way. We had a neighbor at home, or at Tamarack. Well, they lived about a quarter mile or so from us, and they didn't have any kids. And in my letter to my folks, I said, well, early on, I said, I can't tell you where I'm at. They'll censor it, cut a hole in They would cut a hole wherever they wanted to eliminate stuff. And I said this. I said, oh, by the way, I understand that Andrew Smith had 3 kids now.
What was that supposed to mean then?
That I was in the Third Army.
Oh, tricky.
Your own secret
I
code.
think they eventually figured it out.
Yeah, they're probably thinking you're delirious.
Yeah, they probably thought I'd lost my marbles.
And the other thing, maybe, Dad, you had all kinds of film. Tell the story about
Oh
that.
yeah, I had a job of bringing back all of our engineering equipment. Had the pontoon boats and there was extra vehicles and stuff. I had to bring them back to in France, and I stopped at Liège, Belgium, at a well, it was American run, you know, hotel for the Americans. Now, I had taken pictures. I had sneaked a camera. It was a 120 or something like that, roll film, and I had taken, that was some really precious pictures, bad ones and everything, and 12 rolls, so eight each, and I had my stuff in a rifle grenade case that I had taken the partitions out and made it like a little suitcase. I had that in there. I had a .32 revolver, and I can't remember all. I wasn't out of I left it in my room, and I wasn't out of my room a minute, and it was gone.
All his pictures.
They could have taken all the rest. In fact, I think I even had some money on that. If they could have had everything else, if I could have had those 12 rolls of film, undeveloped film.
Yes.
So now, how'd you get back to the States?
I got back on a Liberty ship. Took 22 days to get from Marseille, France to New York. That damn ship kept breaking down. They had problems with the flues in it, you know, the pipes, the boiler. And first thing is, you know, they're traveling at half speed. That's 5 knots. Because they got one boiler that they're working on. Before they finished that one, the other one went out. So now we're bobbing on out in that North Atlantic Sea, you know, in December. You know, and it's pretty rough. No power. Then we get going, just get going good, and the call came from another ship that's 200 and some miles behind us. They wanted our doctor because there was somebody that had an appendix attack. Well, we're drifting that along, waiting for a few hours, and then they'd say, "That's okay. We got a doctor that's closer." Well, that was. I think we were broke down 3 times on the way home. That was a Liberty ship.
When you hit New York City, where did you go? Where did they take you?
Well, I got to New York, and then of course I headed off to Wisconsin.
Well, you got out of the ship and then you were on your own to do whatever?
No, we could
Had to check out someplace.
That's something that I,
You got off the boat in the harbor
yep.
and you walked to where? Hotel?
Yeah,
Okay.
He was on American soil. He didn't care. He probably ran home.
you know, when I went on this tour to Washington, you know,
Yeah.
we had a lot of entertainment at both ends. People and bands and everything.
Yeah.
When I got off the ship, there was 2 guys there tooting a horn.
Oh.
Well, there was so many guys, so many have to deal with.
Yeah.
So you didn't stay, you stayed overnight someplace in New York before you got the train?
No, we didn't. I got on a plane. I mean,
Train.
train.
How'd you know where to go to get the train? Just
No, we had instructions.
okay.
Yeah.
And how long was the train ride to get back to Wisconsin?
Oh,
A couple of days?
I don't think it took 2 days, no.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, did your parents know you were on your way home now? Could you call them on a phone or something?
No. No, I didn't call them or anything, no.
So you walked in on them. Must have been a heck of a surprise.
Well, yeah, I got the tamarack and then I had somebody get a hold of them. Yeah.
Huh.
Wow.
Wow. What a piece of experience. I'm glad I
Yeah.
didn't have to go through it.
Well, there's so much in between that happened that you
Can't remember?
can't remember all those little things.
Well, and the 200, that St. Louis fire lost your records too, in the fire.
Oh, is
Well,
that
yeah.
right?
Yes, I'm just sick.
Yeah,
Yeah, the guy set it
know-
on fire so he wouldn't find his records.
Oh,
they never had my couple of different things. They never said that I was in the 106th Infantry Division. They never had anything about me being in the hospital.
but do you have any records from when you were in the service, or did they all get burned?
I don't know. I don't think they all got burned.
No. I was trying to research.
You can
a
write
little bit.
to them. I
There's-
did.
Oh,
I got all my
there's-
records.
There's things, of course, you don't talk about. I haven't said much about it, but
Yeah, no reason to.
this one day we caught a bunch of Germans out in the open, and out about 400 or 500 yards away, and we eliminated a bunch of them.
Oh, yeah,
But
yeah.
I'm so glad that I wasn't face to face when I had to do that.
Yeah.
Sure.
You wonder, you maybe fighting the Japanese, I think, would be a different story, because they could be so
Very vicious.
brutal and that. But you look like, okay, there's a German. He's a Nordic, and that, and I'm a Norwegian Swede, and that, and we've got a lot of things in common.
Yeah.
And I talked to some German German prisoners afterwards, and it is interesting. Number one is, they are so glad that that thing is over with, and they don't hold anything against the Americans. They're glad that the thing is over, and I talked to different ones, some of them, they could talk pretty good English too, and that,
Well, no one likes being shot at, so you
No.
can't blame them. They wanted to get it over with.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was so senseless, you know, and that.
Yeah.
I
Well,
I tell you, I'm gonna say this. I feel God took care of me. First thing was, when I left Midland Field to go to ASTP, the fellows that I worked with there, that the bombardier program was phasing out. They felt they had enough bombardier trained. My guys then went to gunnery school. They were flying out of England in B-24s. Most of them got shot down over the Ploesti oil fields.
yep.
That's number one. Number two is, when I went to the 106th Infantry Division for 2 weeks, and then went to the Combat Engineers, the 106th Infantry Division was the one division that got hit head on in the Bulge. They lost somewheres in the vicinity of 8,000 in a couple of days.
And they were doing what?
And I would have been a machine gunner.
With the 106th.
Yeah.
I was in the 285th.
Yep.
The other time is when I took this other guy's post that night, and that shell hit that back end of my sleeping bag that I wasn't in.
Yeah.
You
Luck.
know, there's questions sometimes that you can't answer.
I think we referred to as luck at the time.
That's
Yeah.
what we
Who
say.
knows?
It's luck.
Yeah.
There's something else.
Do you have anything else you want to add to this before we wind up here? I'm running out of tape.
Oh, I don't know.
I'll stay here until the sun goes down.
Well, all I can say is that Irene and I have grown up in the times that we enjoyed. It was tough times, but you know, you could walk out of your house and didn't lock it.
Yep.
Didn't
Now,
have to worry about it.
did you get married after you got back from the Army or before you left?
After.
After. Okay.
Afterwards, yeah. I was home. I had dated, well, she was a classmate of Irene's and that, and so I was,
During the war.
during the war, just,
He commuted, or sent letters to him, to her, I mean. I got a few letters when he was in his service, but I did correspond with a lot of servicemen when I was young.
you know, it meant a lot to get those letters. I don't care who it was from.
So what did you do when you got off the train? How'd you get back to the farmhouse?
Well, I
Did you-
was in Tamarack, but I can't remember how I got.
Okay. Did you walk back to the farm or someone give you a ride?
Oh, I can't. Somebody, I got a void there. I'll tell you a little story about my brother, though.
Yeah. Was he in the service?
I had been.
Your brother was in the service?
He was in the service. Yeah.
Okay, Army?
He was in the army. He went overseas when I came home.
Oh,
Yeah, and until he was in Germany in occupation. Well, anyway, I had been dating Irene and that, and I was on the way home this one night, and it was like about 11 o'clock, and it was cold out and that. And I came by, I don't know if you know where the Black Bear Casino is on this side of Carlton.
Yeah.
Okay, came over that hill. Of course, there was no casino, no. But anyway, come over that hill there, and here was a GI out there, thumbing his way, dragging his duffel bag, and I didn't, you know, should I pick him up?
At that time, I thought, it isn't
You
safe.
know, you didn't know if you should pick them up or not. You don't know if they're gonna.
Yep. Yep.
And I buzzed on by, and then I backed up. And this guy threw his duffel bag in the back seat, and it was my brother.
Jeez.
And of course, he was headed for the farm too.
That's 1 in a million.
Oh, if I'd have driven on by him,
Oh, you'd have felt
oh
terrible.
God,